This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2010 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2010. We also look at two more nominees for this year's class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, plus our Spotlight Museum is the Museum of Broadway in New York City. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. The year was 2010. It was the year of the Bieber, as Justin Bieber broke records left and right. A musical telethon was held in support of the victims of the Haitian earthquake. Men at Work lost a copyright infringement lawsuit over parts of their song Down Under sounding way too much like another song called Kookaburra. The Beatles finally started streaming their catalog on iTunes that year. Zoli Teglis became lead singer of the group Pennywise. Bands that formed in 2010 included Disclosure, Bastille, Rufus Du Sol, and the Florida Georgia Line. Bands that broke up or took an extended break included AHA, Brooks and Dunn, Dio, The Jesus Lizard, Budgie, LFO, E.S. Posthumous, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Elephant, the Pussycat Dolls, the Gap Band, Supergrass, the Slits, Simply Red, and Type O Negative. Some of those bands reunited later with various lineups. Bands that either reformed or reunited included the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, Alabama, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Buffalo Springfield, Men Without Hats, The Monkees, The Cars, Color Me Bad, Corrosion of Conformity, Concrete Blonde, Bush, Pulp, A Perfect Circle, Fuel, Eiffel 65, Hole, Garbage, Toad the Wet Sprocket, The Gravediggers, Groove Theory, Toto, Platinum Blonde, Coroner, Quiet Riot, Soundgarden, System of a Down, and Ugly Kid Joe. Pavement and Supertramp did the neat little trick of breaking up and reuniting in the same year. And if you're thinking that an awful lot of bands ran out of money in 2010, you're probably right. It's why they all got back together again. Eminem's Recovery was the biggest selling album of the year. Other big selling albums included Lady Antebellum's Need You Now, Taylor Swift's Speak Now, Justin Bieber's My World 2.0, Susan Boyle's The Gift, Lady Gaga's The Fame, Sade's Soldier of Love, Drake's Thank Me Later, Usher's Raymond vs. Raymond, and Kesha's Animal. Kanye West's album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, came out for the 2010 holiday season, but became a huge force in 2011. Kesha's song TikTok was the biggest selling song of the year. Other big songs of that year included Lady Antebellum's Need You Now, Train's Hey Soul Sister, Katy Perry and Snoop Dogg's California Girls, Usher and will.i.am's OMG, B.O.B. and Hayley Williams' Airplanes, Eminem and Rihanna's Love the Way You Lie, Lady Gaga's Bad Romance, Tayo Cruz's Dynamite, and Tayo Cruz's song with Ludacris, Break Your Heart. On the country charts, Lady Antebellum, now of course called Lady A, had a couple of number one singles, as did the Zac Brown Band and Josh Turner. Also hitting the top of the country singles chart were Blake Shelton, Miranda Lambert, the band Perry, Kenny Chesney, Darius Rucker, Reba McEntire, Joe Nichols, Gerard Neiman, Tim McGraw, Carrie Underwood, Billy Currington, Luke Bryan, Easton Corbin, Chris Young, Brad Paisley, Rascal Flatts, and Jason Aldean. Hip-hop in 2010 was in an interesting place. While it had fully crossed over into the mainstream by then and had become also more inclusive, it was not fully dominating music like it is at the current time. In fact, only 5 hip-hop songs cracked the Billboard Top 10 singles chart for the year. Eminem's Love the Way You Lie and also his song Not Afraid. Nelly's Just a Dream, Lil Wayne and Drake's is right above it, and Jay-Z and Mr. Hudson's Young Forever. That, however, is not to say that hip-hop had a bad year. Far from it. In fact, hip-hop's biggest artists in 2010 set the genre up to becoming the dominant force towards the end of the decade. Eminem, Jay-Z, DJ Khaled, Drake, Lil Wayne, Kid Cudi, T.I., Timbaland, Nicki Minaj, and Kanye all had multiple hits in 2010, and all are still standing to this day. Okay, Kanye's current assorted issues, to be nice about it, notwithstanding. Usher had a big dance hit with DJ's Got Us Falling in Love Again, while Tayo Cruz had a hit with Dynamite, and Neo's song Beautiful Monster spent some time at the top of the dance club play charts. But otherwise, dance music was dominated by Lady Gaga's Bad Romance, along with songs by dance pop and R&B divas like Katy Perry, Kesha, Jennifer Lopez, Christina Aguilera, Rihanna, Kylie Minogue. The original dance diva, Donna Summer, had a top 10 smash hit to Paris with Love, while Destiny's Child alumni Beyoncé also had a dance hit with Lady Gaga called Telephone. Another Destiny's Child alumni, Kelly Rowland, continued her partnership with David Guetta with the song Commander. David also had the EDM classic Getting Over You. As far as the other quote-unquote legit EDM artists, other than David Guetta, of course, you had Goldfrapp, the Chemical Brothers, and Christine W. with big years. 2010 was the year that Duck Sauce gave us the classic dance track, Barbra Streisand. And the Swedish House Mafia and Pharrell Williams gave us the festival favorite, One Your Name. The top 10 DJs on DJ Mag's Top 100 DJs list were Armin van Buuren, David Guetta, Tiesto, Deadmau5, Above and Beyond, Paul Van Dyke, Gareth Emery, Marcus Schultz, Ferry Corsten, and Axwell. There was some controversy with the list that year, as there were many allegations of cheating when it came to the fan vote. In Latin music, the big artists for 2010 were Shakira, Juanes, Camila, Cheyenne, Prince Royce, Daddy Yankee, Diego Torres, Marc Anthony, Enrique Iglesias, Ivy Queen, Ricardo Arjona, Pitbull, and Don Omar. Musicals or revivals of musicals that were around in 2010 included The Addams Family musical, American Idiot, Elf the musical, Matilda the musical, La Cage aux Folles, Memphis, and Heathers the musical. Musical films of that year included Burlesque and the Disney animated musical Tangled. Artists who passed away in 2010 included entertainer extraordinaire Miss Lena Horne, Peter Steele of Type O Negative and also the group Carnivore, Ronnie James Dio, Eddie Fisher, Teddy Pendergrass, jazz guitarist Herb Ellis, record producer Mitch Miller, jazz singer Abby Lincoln, singer Solomon Burke, opera singer Dame Joan Sutherland, Paul Gray of Slipknot, Gregory Isaacs, Captain Beefheart, Tina Marie, Doug Feiger of The Knack, Gregory Slay of Remy Zero, Lee Freeman of Strawberry Alarm Clock, Chili B of Nucleus, rapper Guru of Gangstar, Dave Fisher of the Highwaymen, country singer Judy Lynn, country singer Slim Bryant, country singer Jimmy Dean, Harvey Fuqua of the Moonglows, gospel singer Walter Hawkins, Alan Hummel of Big Star, Al Goodman of Ray Goodman and Brown, Richie Hayward of Little Feat, Mitch Dane of the Dillards, Michael Bean of The Call, singer King Coleman, and gospel singer Albertina Walker. At the Grammy Awards for the music of 2010, Arcade Fire became the first indie artist to win Album of the Year for their album, The Suburbs. Lady Antebellum won Song and Record of the Year for Need You Now. Jazz artist Esperanza Spalding beat out heavily favored Justin Bieber for Best New Artist. At the American Music Awards, Justin Bieber crushed the competition, winning 4 awards, including Artist of the Year. Justin also won big at the Billboard Music Awards, although Eminem and Rihanna managed to crash the Bieber party. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Lady Gaga wore her famous meat dress to the award ceremony that year, which was dominated by her music video for her song Bad Romance, which won Video of the Year. Usher won Album of the Year for Raymond vs. Raymond, and the B.O.B. and Bruno Mars won Single of the Year for Nothing on You at the Soul Train Music Awards. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held in Oslo, Norway that year, Lena from Germany won for the song Satellite. Brad Paisley won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, while Taylor Swift won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. Mumford & Sons won Album of the Year for Sigh No More, and Teeny Tempa won Song of the Year for Pass Out at the Brit Awards. Arcade Fire won Album of the Year for The Suburbs. The Young Artist for Haiti charity song Wavin' Flag won Single of the Year, and Neil Young won Artist of the Year at that year's Juno Awards. Angus and Julius Stone won Album of the Year for Down the Way, and also Single of the Year for Big Jet Plane at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, Memphis won Best Musical, and La Cage aux Folles won Best Revival of a Musical. Musically, at the Academy Awards, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails won Best Film Score for the movie The Social Network, while Randy Newman's song We Belong Together from Toy Story 3 won Best Song of the Year. Jennifer Higdon's Violin Concerto won the Pulitzer Prize for Music, and the Double X won the Mercury Music Prize. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held on March 15th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. At the ceremony, the hall inducted Geffen Records founder David Geffen, songwriter Otis Blackwell, the songwriting and producing team of Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich, songwriter Mort Schumann, songwriter Jesse Stone, and the songwriting team of Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil into the non-performers category. In the performers category, the hall inducted Genesis, Jimmy Cliff, the Hollies, the Stooges, and this next group. Benny Andersson was in a popular Swedish group called the HOF Stars in the mid-1960s. Meanwhile, Bjorn Ulvaeus was in another group called the Hootenanny Singers. The groups crossed paths while touring Sweden in the 1960s, and Benny and Bjorn got to know each other pretty well during that time. In June of 1966, Benny and Bjorn decided to write a song together called Isn't It Easy to Say? The HOF Stars manager, Stig Andersson, who also owned a record label, thought that the song was pretty good and told Benny and Bjorn to write together some more. In 1969, Benny and Bjorn submitted a song to the Swedish festival Melodifestivalen, which is the festival that picks the country's representative for the Eurovision Song Contest every year. While they ended up second in voting that year, one good thing at least came out of it. They met Annafrid Linkstad, nicknamed Frida, who was also in the competition with her own music. Frida was an up-and-coming singer-songwriter in her own right and had already made a name for herself in Sweden and had performed on national television. Bjorn and Frida started dating, and eventually they got married. The last member of this soon-to-form group was Agnetha Falskog, who was also a singer-songwriter and who also had a #1 song in Sweden. Benny and Agnetha met during a festival in 1969, became a couple, and then married in 1971. While they were all on vacation together in 1970, they decided to not only keep writing and producing each other's music, but to also do music together as a group. Also, right around this time, manager Stig Andersson wanted to break out of Sweden and make a name for himself internationally and decided that he was going to work with the new quartet, then known as Bjorn and Benny, Agnetha and Annafrid. After a while, they got sick of saying their full names all the time, so they shortened it to ABBA. To date, none of them have officially said whose name is which letter, so figure that the first A could either be Agnetha or Anna Fried, depending on the day. ABBA's first hit was the 1972 hit People Need Love, which was released in America on Playboy Records. That actually confused a lot of people who thought that since it was on Playboy Records and was a song called People Need Love and done by two women and two men, then it must be a softcore porn, and well, you can kind of see why some people would think that way. Also in 1972, the group tried to get into the Melodifestivalen again by submitting the song Ring Ring. They ended up third this time, but they released the song and it became a big hit in Europe. Still, they wanted more. In 1973, ABBA decided to submit a song to Melodifestivalen again. They were going to submit the song Hasta Mañana. However, that song only showcased one of the two singers, so they decided on a song that was written specifically for that year's contest. They had submitted a song the year before, but that didn't actually make it to the finals that year. This new song was recorded on December 17, 1973, and was purposely produced to sound like a Phil Spector Wall of Sound production. This time, they won Melodifestivalen with this song, now named Waterloo. The group decided to be different from every other group in the contest. They dressed in flashy silver outfits, complete with big boots. They also had choreography, and the song was upbeat, two things that the contest wasn't usually used to. The plan worked. Waterloo, about a woman surrendering her love to a man, won the competition. Waterloo was then released worldwide in 1974 and became a huge hit. It went number 1 in a few countries and top 10 in America. Waterloo has since sold over 5 million certified physical copies with claimed sales of over 6 million copies. Also in 2005, Eurovision put out its list of best songs of the past 50 years for their contest, and Waterloo was voted number 1 at that time. After the success of Waterloo, ABBA were off and running. Songs like Mamma Mia, Fernando, Money, 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 Knowing Me, Knowing You, That's the Name of the Game, Take a Chance on Me, and of course their iconic hit, Dancing Queen, became worldwide smash hits. They toured relentlessly in the late 1970s, but unfortunately, it also put a lot of strain on their marriages and both couples divorced. They still stayed together as a group right up until they unofficially broke up the first time in 1982. Anna Fried, going under her new nickname Frida, had a big solo hit called I Know There's Something Going On, which was produced by Phil Collins. The group would sometimes get together over the decades for special events, such as the Swedish premiere for the movie based on their songs Mamma Mia. Funny thing was that as the decades went on, their music found new audiences, helped by movies such as Mamma Mia, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Muriel's Wedding. There was a touring exhibit called ABBA World in 2010 that caught everyone's attention, along with an ABBA museum in their native Sweden, an appearance in a dancing video game, a box set, and a photo book, proving that the power of ABBA never really died. In 2020, the group announced that they were putting out a new album, their first one in almost 40 years. The COVID pandemic postponed that for a while, but that album of new music called Voyage came out in 2021. The COVID break also gave the band time to develop a hologram concert called ABBA Voyage. That concert was in London and ended in May of 2023, but it looks like this concert residency is the last thing that the four of them might be together for, although there's rumors of another album coming out in the next year or so. Never say never, but as a reminder, they're not spring chickens anymore. They're all in their mid-70s and are entitled to have the fans simply enjoy the music that they've made and leave it at that. I think they've earned it. ABBA has released 9 studio albums, 2 live albums, and 7 compilation albums. Of those, 7 have gone top 40, with 1 going top 10. Ironically, their last one, 2021's Voyage, which hit number 2. They've also released 50 singles. Of those, 14 hit the top 40, with 4 of those 14 hitting the top 10, including one going to number 1. Not Waterloo, but 1976's Dancing Queen. They've sold hundreds of millions of records. They're one of the biggest selling groups of all time. They've influenced different cultures and genders. They've won countless awards, and even though they've only been nominated for 1 Grammy Award, and it was for Album of the Year, by the way, for their last album, Voyage, their song, Dancing Queen, was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Presented for induction by Barry and Robin Gibb of 1997 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, the Bee Gees, Agnetha Falskog, Benny Andersson, Bjorn Ulvaeus, and Anna-Frid Ligstad, or Frida if you prefer. ABBA, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2010, and we have put a selection of ABBA's greatest hits onto this week's music podcast playlist, the link to which is in the show notes. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History In-Depth podcast where we go more in-depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History In-Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame released its nominees for the Performers category for this year's induction into the next class for the Hall. This list does not include whoever they decide will be inducted into the other categories like Musical Excellence or Early Influencer, because I don't think they've officially actually figured those out yet. In any event, this list for the Performers category is as follows: Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Cher, The Dave Matthews Band, Eric B. and Rakim, Foreigner, Peter Frampton, Jane's Addiction, Kool and the Gang, Lenny Kravitz, Oasis, Sinead O'Connor, Ozzy Osbourne, Sade, and A Tribe Called Quest. The good news is that you get to vote for whoever gets inducted, as the fan vote is a small part of the total vote, but it is a part, so go to rockhall.com to vote. That's ROCKHALLCOM. We will put that link in the show notes for you. You can vote for up to 7 artists once a day, every day through April 26th. For the past couple of months, we've been making the case for you to vote for an artist or two to be inducted. Usually it's 2 artists per episode until we get through the list. We are almost done with this list, actually. We only have 3 left. So check out the past 6 weeks' episodes to catch up on all the other ones that we have spoken about. This week, we are going to cover 2 multi-platinum selling, multi-award winning artists, Sinead O'Connor and Sade. First, to Sinead. Sinead released 10 studio albums, 1 live album, 5 compilation albums, and 1 EP. Of those, 4 hit the top 40, with her only top 10 being 1990's I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got, which hit number 1. She also released 54 singles. Only 1 hit the American charts, but it was a huge one. It was 1990's smash hit remake of Prince's song Nothing Compares to You. Probably the reason why Sinead received the nomination this year, aside from the fact that she passed away from natural causes in 2023, probably has more to do with her influence rather than her actual numbers on her career. In an era where no one stood for anything or only pushed buttons because it either got them a payday or attention, much like today's era of influencers and reality show stars, Sinead stood up for what she felt was right and stood against what she felt was wrong, regardless of the personal or professional cost. She spoke out about racism, especially in the music industry, sexual abuse, a woman's right to choose, the events in Northern Ireland at that time, and human rights. And she never backed down from anything or anyone unless she felt that she might have aimed her weapon of choice at the wrong person, which happens sometimes. Okay, actually more than a few times. She was also blatantly open and honest about everything going on in her life, including her own fallacies. Even her signature shaved head was partially an act of rebellion, since her record label wanted her to grow her hair long to make her, in their words, quote, more feminine. Sinead didn't want the career that her record label wanted her to have. Sinead wasn't about sexualizing herself for her fans. She let her music do the talking for her, because Lord knows she left it all out there for everyone to see in her music. Her songwriting was painful, sometimes joyous, but a lot of the times she said things that others either dared not say or wanted to say but just couldn't. In short, Sinead O'Connor was a badass who embodied the rock and roll spirit, and in a world that could use less conformers and more rebels, the world could use more people like Sinead. Unfortunately, her like rarely ever walk the earth. Sinead deserves induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, would she have actually shown up to accept the award? Younger Sinead definitely would not have shown up. Older Sinead might have. Maybe. Unfortunately, we will never know, but she deserves your vote. Now, to Sade, the band, and the artist. Okay, for those of you not in the know, Sade is actually the name of the band, with Sade Adu being the front woman and the most recognizable member of the band, and who the band is actually named after. The nomination is for the entire band, by the way, not just Sade Adu, the singer. So, with all that said, let us check out the band stats. Sade released 6 studio albums, 1 live album, and 2 compilation albums. Of those, every single one of them, including the compilations, went top 10, which is an extremely rare feat in America. That's including all but 3 of those going top 5, with the 1985 album Promise and 2010's album Soldier of Love both going to number 1. Sade also released 2 EPs, but there's no stats on how well they did, so they probably were overseas releases, I'm assuming. Sade also released 23 singles. Of those, 13 went top 40 on the American charts, with 9 of those 13 going top 10, including 3 going to number 1. Sade's influence is that they helped to pioneer what became known as neo-soul by mixing pop and R&B with smooth jazz, and were years ahead of the 90s movement, as their debut album Diamond Life came out in 1984, long before artists like Soul II Soul, Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill, or Maxwell took the genre to new heights. You could probably put Simply Red into maybe a blue-eyed neo-soul category, I suppose, since they were popular right around the same time as Sade. Or maybe they're more Britpop. I don't know. Regardless, what's amazing about Sade, the band, is that they're still popular to this very day, despite the fact that they haven't actually put out an album since 2010 Soldier of Love, and they haven't toured since 2011. In fact, a common question musically these days is, hey, when is Sade going to actually put out some new music? Also, not to make anyone feel old, but Sade Adu is now 65 years old. All right, feel old, people. I do. For helping to pioneer the neo-soul movement, Sade also deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Remember, go to rockhall.com to vote. That's rockhall.com, and the link, as always, is in the show notes. You can vote for up to 7 artists once a day, every single day, right up until April 26th, and we are going to put Sade and Sinead's music into our podcast playlist for this week, the link to which, of course, is in the show notes as well. Next week, we are going to finish our look at this year's nominees with the Dave Matthews Band. There is a museum in the heart of Times Square in New York City that's dedicated to the history of Broadway shows that you may not be aware of. The Museum of Broadway is at 145 West 45th Street between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue. The museum was supposed to open up in 2021, but the pandemic put that dream to bed for about a year. The museum is open 7 days a week at 9:30 a.m., but their closing hours shift depending on the day, especially Wednesdays when it closes around 2:30 during the colder months. The museumofbroadway.com is their website, and we will put that website into the show notes for you. Now that COVID lockdowns are done, and it's been a year or two that Broadway has been up and running, Broadway is now back at the top of its game with shows that I like to call tourist trap musicals. You know, those are the ones that tourists come to New York City specifically to see, and if you live in New York City, you're forced to take your out-of-town visitors to go see them, whether you want to go see them or not. I'm talking about any of the songbook musicals from acts like ABBA, Carole King, or anything from Andrew Lloyd Webber, or, God forbid, anything from Disney. Of course, there's always the great Hamilton, but good luck getting those tickets. About once every decade or so, at least one musical transcends Broadway and becomes a pop culture phenomenon. Think Hamilton in the past decade, or The Producers almost 20 years ago by now. There was at one time another great period on Broadway with a musical that also became a pop culture icon. The 1960s were considered one of the blockbuster periods for Broadway musicals. There were 10 shows that had over 1,000 performances and 3 that had over 2,000 performances. One of those shows' cast albums was so popular that it made Billboard magazine's list of greatest chart-performing albums of all time. This musical is also an example of how failing the first time out does not mean the end of the world. The musical Hello Dolly was written by Jerry Herman and Michael Stewart. In 1835, there was a play called A Day Well Spent. In 1938, Thornton Wilder took the plot from that play and turned it into his own play called The Merchant of Yonkers. That play, by the way, tanked really badly. Not one to give up on an idea, though. Wilder revised the play, and 17 years later, he brought it back again as the play The Matchmaker. This time, it became a hit and was turned into the 1958 film The Matchmaker, starring Shirley Booth, Anthony Hopkins, and Shirley MacLaine. When it came time to do the musical version of the story, even that had problems. The role of Dolly was originally written with Ethel Merman in mind, but she turned it down. So did actress Mary Martin, who became famous for playing Peter Pan on Broadway. Carol Channing ended up playing the role and became a star because of it. By the way, Merman and Martin would end up playing Dolly later on during its Broadway run once Carol Channing left the show. And, of course, Merman and Martin agreed to come and do the show once they realized that it was a huge hit. Because, sure, why not? Even making Gower champion as director on this came after a lot of the other top musical directors turned it down first, which must have made him feel really special. Not. Anyway, the musical started its run in Detroit, Michigan, and Washington, D.C., where reviewers trashed it. The musical then had major changes made to it. They added a couple of songs and changed the title of the musical from Dolly, a Damned Exasperating Woman to Hello Dolly. That name change happened after someone heard Louis Armstrong's version of the song Hello Dolly, which was getting popular at that time. Finally, the musical Hello Dolly premiered on Broadway in 1964 to rave reviews. It held the record for the longest run on Broadway for a few years, and it won 10 Tony Awards, which tied it with South Pacific for the most Tony Awards ever until the producers in Hamilton broke that record. The original cast recording became a huge hit on the Billboard Albums chart, reaching number 1, a title it held for 7 weeks until it got knocked off by another album called Hello Dolly, Louis Armstrong's album with the song that inspired the musical to change its name in the first place. How's that for irony? It was also the biggest selling album of 1964, even bigger than anything those 4 guys from Liverpool put out in America that year. The cast recording also took home a Grammy Award, and the 1969 movie version of the musical also became a huge hit and won 3 Academy Awards. The Broadway musical Hello Dolly, with various props and wardrobe, in the collection of the Museum of Broadway in New York City, and we will put the music for that cast album onto this week's music podcast playlist. The link, as I've said before, is in the show notes. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.